this going to benefit the nation? So he did actually ask me that. So, if you want to consider that a challenge, that would be a challenge in that situation. But that was partly because when he was learning about the project himself, he was trying to figure out how it would benefit the community. So he really wanted to hear me articulate that in very clear ways. With regards to that. And then I would say the other challenge that I got, and again, I wouldn't necessarily call it a challenge, but there were some elders who would ask me about my own genealogy. And it was an interesting situation because you go or I go to an elders committee, and so you talk about what you want to do, talk about who you were, and then, particularly for Codacha and McLeod Lake, because I'm from Sekheidene, but I have relatives in both of those communities. The elders would sometimes talk among themselves and they would ask me a question. And, part of me realized with regards to them asking me questions, they wanted to know if I knew what my connection to community was, but they also wanted to know if I even knew it at all. So there was kind of that challenge in that sense, is that they wanted to make sure that I wasn't that I hadn't gone off to university and forgot everything about the community. I guess is probably the best way of putting it. So yeah, there's those kind of challenges that existed there. There was some question regarding honorariums, so how much honorarium should be, but that was a very minor question, and part of that was a learning experience on my part, because a lot of universities either don't require honorariums if you're doing research in community, or the amounts that they require are small compared to what communities actually expect.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just for my MA, there was my uncle Gordon actually challenged me with regards to the written consent form. So that's a little bit separate from this project, but he just stated that signing something was the way white men did it, and so I shouldn't be asking him to sign anything. But then he ultimately did sign it. But it also, kind of, it was good for him to actually say that.
I had a question
Yeah.
regarding this. So for out of the three communities, was there ever a settlement reached with the federal government or with Electrolux in the damages caused by the dams in that?
Yeah, so my community reached an agreement around 2008, 2009 over the impacts of the dam. Quadacha reached an agreement around the same time. I don't believe McLeod Lake has, but I think they're interested in actually pursuing that. So, in some instances, this is something that kind of complicated it because BC Hydro, when they sign these agreements, they don't want to necessarily have the nation complaining about them. So there was a little bit of questioning, not from the nation, but from the university regarding whether or not this project was okay. But as far as I can tell, BC Hydro really doesn't care. So, and with regards to the settlements, I mean, there's always that question of, does the settlement actually provide compensation? And I mean, certainly it has provided opportunities for the nations to do certain things that maybe they wouldn't be able to have done before. But again, can you really put a monetary value on the change of life that happened?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So after doing this research, what are the other research areas have you identified? What
The
research?
biggest ones that I've been working on in recent years is one. So McLeod Lake signed adhesion to Treaty 8, 1999, 2000. Quadacha and Psyche don't actually have treaties. So they're currently in treaty negotiations. So I've done some work for my nation regarding treaty, particularly with regards to kind of Aboriginal title. Where were we? Where was our traditional territory? So I've done a lot of work regarding that. I've also done work regarding language and culture. So there's a language and culture committee that meets every Wednesday in the morning, and we meet with elders, and it is about like learning the language, but also about developing language courses, language programs, and also making sure that we're kind of collecting information from our elders before they pass away. So I've been involved in that. And then I have another project that I'm currently working on, which is looking at what life was like before the reservoir. Because one of the things that really became apparent when I would ask elders, what was life like before the reservoir? There was a lot of information, and elders are very interested in really talking about life before, but also some questions that emerged as well. And kind of highlighting the community-based aspect. Uncle Billy asked me how this project and the Bennett Dam would benefit the nation. For the current project I'm working on, which is looking at failed economic developments, he was very excited about that because, in his opinion, the nation should have control over mining in the traditional territory. And so he really wanted to talk about where some historic mines that existed, but also where members of the community had identified mineral deposits in the traditional territory. So he really, really excited about that.
Where is your data? Where is this data stored? You have like over 71 interviews you did. Like, is it with you? Is it with the nation? Is it with a university? Like, who owns this? Is it an institution? It, where is this data and who owns it?
Well, the nation's own it. So that was something that I was quite adamant about. The university never received a copy of any of these interviews. I didn't even put that as an option for the university. So yeah, University of Alberta didn't get anything. The nation's owned the interviews. Quid actually had me sign a research agreement that they had recently developed, clearly stating that. But for the other two nations, I mean, that was always my intent. Is I am collecting these interviews, and as part of the interview process, I actually confirmed with elders. Are you okay if I use this for this research? Are you okay if the nation has a copy of the interview? And I would say all of the elders said, yeah, of course, to both answers. So one of the things I did was provide copies to the nations of all of the interviews, as well as the final dissertation, as well as make a presentation in community. So I provided them with all three. I also kept copies of the interviews, which is what the elders also were asked if it was okay if I kept copies of the interviews. Part of that was so that I could use it as I turned the dissertation into a book, but part of it also was that I can provide copies to the nation if anything happens in the case of the nation losing it. And of course, that can always be a struggle depending on who's working in the band office and if there's some sort of development that's taking place. And in my nation's instance, we had an MA student a few years ago who was actually working on his MA while I was working on this project. And as I found out later on, he was going to create a database for the nation, and then he quit. But all of the documents that people have been sending him from the nation, yeah, people aren't really sure where they are. So there's some questions regarding what happened to that information. So yeah, I gave copies to the nation, and the nation does own the interviews, but I also kept copies for myself.
A simple technical question. You were interviewing in remote area. What equipment did you use?
I just had an audio recorder. So I did use audio. I didn't use video, but I just used an audio recorder. And then I would back it up onto my laptop every day. And then once I got out of, once I got back to, say, Prince George or Edmonton, I would usually make a backup on an external drive, or, and this is going to date the research, I burned a lot of CDs and DVDs as well.
I like that.
Yeah.
So the transcripts, like transcription process, did you use NVivo software or Otter for transcription, or was it all manually done?
I didn't actually transcribe the interviews. I took notes based on what was on the audio recording. So I didn't actually create transcripts, but it was manually done. I recently had a student working on actually digitalizing the notes that I'd taken.